So yeah, it already starts with a gag, you know. We're talking about production now. That's what we're discussing. We're discussing the notion of how we produce content for people to understand topics. And here's one where
He is dressed and dancing there like the Chernobyl musketeer. Please.
I covered this exact material myself, so it's to me it's kind of interesting from the standpoint of
story tonight is the threat of nuclear annihilation.
Can you see that?
It's probably been a while
you can.
since you thought
That's cool.
about it, but there was a time when people lived in
wrong one. Skipped ahead.
Children used to be shown this. Musketeer. Please, America, put this man out of everyone's misery.
Okay, so it's a gag about Spicer, you know.
Like it might be a good time to talk about voting because election day is this Tuesday. Yes, there are elections this Tuesday. Depending on where you live, you could be voting for your governor, your state legislator, or even your city comptroller, which is a very important position. They control the city. Without them, the city would be completely out of control.
See, so it's gags that make it go, right? But
which you absolutely should. It may be worth asking, how much do you trust the system that counts your ballots? Because the truth is, many of us don't know the first thing about how our votes get counted.
When you cast your ballot, how do you know that they're getting it right?
Waste time.
Yeah.
Oh, well, isn't that...
Let's talk about our voting machines. And first, you should know, there is no single standard voting system in this country. In some places, you vote by filling out a paper ballot and feeding it into a machine. At others, you press a button, get a printout, and then have that scanned into a different machine.
So what he's talking about right now, here in 2019, on his comedy show that's very popular, is something I was talking about, at least at a local level in Los Angeles, but I know it was reaching further than that. And I know that bits that I was making were being used around the network. So Houston, DC, LA, New York, and the Bay Area, right? And his is more funny now, and he's got a lot more viewers and all that. But the question, the sad feeling I have is that it's not going to have any impact. So a guy like Greg Palast, who has been actively going at this stuff, and I'll show you some of his stuff in a minute. Somebody we
should. Others, you press a touch screen, and that's it. That's the whole voting process. And while that last option may seem like the best, it's actually, for reasons that we'll get into later, the absolute worst. Now, the reason that most of us vote on electronic machines at all has to do with the 2000 election. And for those of you too young to remember that, first, I've got to ask you, is euphoria accurate?
Hey, Banks, so right there, he's about to talk about the 2000 election, which I covered as a journalist, and we were all there, you know. And now he has to do the thing where he gets the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds to link using a gag, right? A simple gag would be pick something that's generational, like euphoria, which I don't know anything about, obviously, and he clearly plays that he doesn't as well. But the linkage there across generations is, I got to ask you two questions if you don't know anything about the 2000 election. One is about a very contemporary thing. And then that affords him the ability to talk about the thing from the past that he wants to bring up, which otherwise the millennials will be bored by and tune out. So these are the tactics that I'm talking about and how much they invade the principle of delivering news or journalism. This is a show, right? And I was trying to make the news. And now all of the news is a show, right? That's what we've been saying for many, many years, right? So it's all tactical, whether it's him or Maddow or going up to quote legitimate news places, but it avoids what I was trying to do, and which very few people can, I think, process, is the long form, deeper, more analytical approach to any topic is now the exception and is almost impossible to engage, if you will. Even here on YouTube, right? I was watching Rogan, and what was cool about Rogan, I thought, was that he just invites him in, turns everything on, and just goes. And he'll be quiet for long stretches, and they'll talk about something. They'll be distracted by something on the tape. They'll let things happen. In the words of Cool AD, I take place like an accident. Those improvisational moments and those things are pretty cool about his style. By the way, thank you to my neighbor who hipped me to check that stuff out. That was interesting. I did subscribe. I'll check some of those out. But again, he did an interview over and over again with his stuff. It's very difficult to be an intellectual and to be as educated as I am and to have read as much as I have and to be older than all these guys by just a few years and to listen to the limited discourse that they're dropping for the sake of their audiences who are even further removed from the amount of historical and intellectual information. Because I would have interceded. I would like to produce both of them. I would produce any of these guys, really, if I could. I would go and produce Joe Rogan or for a show, or Oliver for a show. Now that I think would be great. We could collaborate to get the two tempos to meet better. We're using this election episode last night of the John Oliver show to discuss this. So he makes the gag about euphoria.
Horny, sparkly drug addicts. I'm honestly curious. I don't know any teens, and I suspect the people behind Euphoria don't either. But
it's a good joke, right? I mean, anyway, she's about to tell them about the 2000 election, and it's so incredible. I can see with my own eyes and hear with my own ears the distillation of all of the truths that were in there that have been shat out, and all we're left with is the national narrative of the 2000 election. And as a journalist covering it then, I cannot even explain the pain. The pain is incomprehensible. It feels like the weight of ages. But here's how he describes it now to teenagers. So now I have to accept, right? I'm 52 and I was there then. That's irrelevant if I want to communicate about this, right? I got to stop grabbing that. Pointless. You should try it like John does, right? He makes a joke about euphoria and goes, hey, are you guys all just horny druggies? Haha, I don't know if you are or not, but I don't know if they do either. Funny joke, good joke. Now he's going to describe the 2000 election, right?
But second, very basically, the 2000 election came down to just over 1,000 votes in Florida, which triggered a recount, which turned out to be an absolute nightmare because, unfortunately, many key Florida precincts used punch card ballots. And a major issue with punch card ballots was the fact that on some of them, little bits of paper or chads might not have punched all the way through, leading to images like this and non-stop news coverage like this.
Gore's hopes hang by a chad.
Dimpled chads.
Dangling chads. Hanging chads.
Indented chads.
Lone chads.
Another claim, chad buildup.
A pregnant chad.
The race comes down to the chads.
Yeah, it's true. Much like the third elimination in every season of The Bachelorette, it all came down to the chads. Chad G, you have the eyes of a murderer, and Chad R, you're 5'8". So Chad R, I'm afraid you have to go.
Okay, couple of funny, good jokes there. Ties up the thing, chopped up little chunks of the chads, that's it. Then make the chads the joke into the chat thing, and you're done. So that was the entire treatment of what happened in the 2000 election with regard to him and voting machines. This is his predecessor to talking about the voting machines, which is what I covered in 2004. But in order to do this right, we should cover 2000 properly. In order for it to come down to the chads, several things had to happen, right? Including the obvious exposure of votes cast by people in our country to just people who had no business handling the votes, and the tossing out of votes, and the alteration by specific people in key places, which led to lawsuits after lawsuits after lawsuits. And we only focused on Florida in order to expedite the process so we could have the Electoral College and we could have a president. That's the only reason we did that. Now, we could have extended it to March 1st. I advocated for that. So these are the things. My America, right, would have been the better America. That's just a fact. I can see it clearly in my mind, and you can hear it now. And if we had done that then, we'd be living in a different America. I guarantee you. And it would be a calmer and better place. I'm not saying the Bush-Gore election meant that Gore would have won. I'm saying we would have exposed openly the massive numbers of manipulations going on in the 50 states that have no federal unification about how voting is going on. And we would have found these little counties where shit's shady. And we would have found these other little places where they're obviously manipulating either machines or handheld votes. We would have found it. We could have used the election of 2000 to make the discourse that. So had Gore won, maybe he would have done that. It might have been the one shot we have. But when the politician wins, he says, what do you mean? It all worked fine, right? So this is the history of manipulating elections long before Trump's Russia manipulation. If anything, the Russians watched me do it and said, I mean, right? I mean, like, this is, I don't mean me, but us covering that, doing that, right? And said, this is the easiest thing in the world to manipulate. Because we're dumb. We're really being dumbed down at this point. And the history is completely lost because everyone went to study business. They stopped studying society, culture, history. And the way history is being taught is through Daily Show and comedy TV. to create consensuses between the Maddow audience, the Daily Show audience, the whatever the shows are. And those consensuses are full of places where they're completely contradictory and wrong. And they leave out the depth of the point here. A Federal Elections Commission Act could have standardized and should standardize the way the nation votes, and they shouldn't be using paperless DRE.
Now, one result of that mess was that America became understandably nervous about punch card ballots. And in 2002, Congress passed the Help America Vote Act, offering states $3.9 billion to help administer federal elections and buy new voting equipment, which sounds great. But the then chair of the Election Assistance Commission, which distributed funding for the new machines, realized that there was a problem immediately.
I was forced to send $2.3 billion to the 50 states to buy equipment, even though the equipment was not ready to be bought.
So why'd you do it?
We had to do it. We begged Congress, let us do the research before we send the money, and Congress said no.
So the politicians knew these machines wouldn't work.
The politicians,
Not politicians.
don't care. Washington believes that the machines can't be that bad because, after all, it produced them. So if they won the race, how bad can the machine be?
The machine can't be bad because it produced me. That is some faulty logic right there. It's like saying reverse cowgirl is the best sex position because it gave us Abraham Lincoln. I mean, it absolutely did. That's just a fact. But correlation does not equal causation. And reverse cowgirl does not equal Abraham Lincoln unless you're one of these two fuck machines. Look, he brought the log, she brought the cabin. That's just a history fact that I'm not willing to argue about.
Bang. Okay, so another tactic there, right? So he just covered the Hava the way I was trying to tell you guys about it a little bit earlier, but he didn't really cover the Hava. He just went for one interview with the guy from then who said, I had to distribute the stuff and it wasn't ready. Hava was a cover-up. As I said earlier in this piece, it makes all the sense in the world. Everybody's freaked out about the election going wrong. Let's pass a thing to say that we're caring about elections. What we'll do is make sure the money just goes to everybody we know already who's controlling the situations in all these places, and they'll just spend it how they would. There's no standardization going on. There's no surveillance going on. There's no monitoring going on. There's no oversight going on. There's just, tell America we're throwing $4 billion at the problem. Our voting will be safe. Boom. And then we move on. And that was amazing. I covered all of that quite loudly on the news. I interviewed multiple people in those days about this kind of stuff. And it's been reduced to just this, right? Hava. That was it. And from the beginning, I've been calling for a FECA, Federal Elections Commission Act. So it's like to revise the Federal Elections Commission and to standardize. So it was really weird to watch this show. But anyway, it's a good show. And his jokes are funny. That was a funny joke. But look where he went. He went to Abraham Lincoln's parents to kind of like bail out of this. All this stuff is tactical, right? When you're doing comedy, I guess. I'm just not good at it. You know?
States rushed to buy electronic voting machines before they were ready to be bought.
That's
and
correct.
There were already some red flags. One machine in Iowa had 300 ballots fed into it and somehow produced 4 million votes. And to meet the demand, at least one company outsourced production of the machines. And as reporters later found, quality controls were sometimes close to non-existent.
Maraming bansa na hindi nakakaalam na sa Pilipinas nanggagaling ang
Many people do not know that we made these
Barr
machines in the
says he
Philippines.
worked on thousands of voting machines shipped to the United States with what he says was virtually no testing done on them. Originally, a fraction of the machines underwent a so-called vibration test. And what was this quality control test?
Sineshake nila yung machine.
They shake the machine.
That's it. They tested the machine by shaking it. Which is weird because the only time you should ever shake a voting machine is when you're voting for Jill Stein. In which case, that's actually how they
Again,
do it.
funny
You
joke.
walk in, you shake the machine, and you leave. Trust me, the machine will totally record your vote for Jill Stein, just like you and I both want it to. That clip is actually from 2007, but a shocking number of machines.
From 2007. The joke about Jill Stein also immediately takes him away from the Green Party and any alternatives and puts him finally in the position of where you can imagine he might be. Probably a Democrat, basically supporting the general Democratic Party. Perhaps Bernie, who knows, but as a comedian and as a former Brighton, that comedy there is very funny and as they say, tongue in cheek, but it stabs the Green Party, doesn't it? Whether or not you like Jill Stein, it does. And that's the other thing that happened during my lifetime, the destruction of the multi-party system. Anybody who tells you it's multi-party, they haven't watched it actually become a two-party system and how that happened. And that is a very bad thing for the United States of America. Parliamentary procedure would be way better if we had representation, proportional representation of various parties, just as it is in civilized places in the world. But let's continue, and I'm going to keep interrupting to give some details about things that I wish we would cover. He's about to go into, he's just told you about how they just threw the money at the stuff. All the states got the machines. There's no standard machines. There's many places where voting goes a certain way. Well, because of my reporting and the reporting of people like us, we got the Secretary of State of California to demand that no machine would ever be implemented again after 2004, right? That didn't have a paper trail. If we wouldn't have done that, how could I even say that would have worked? California. And it's pretty easy to manipulate, folks, and that's what you're about to learn about from him now. I mean,
bought back then are still in use. And aging machines can be a real problem. Some counties have found that the glue holding the touchscreen can degrade, meaning that over the years, the screen can slip out of place and register votes incorrectly. And the danger isn't just machines going wrong by accident. There's also the threat of someone gaining control of them for their own ends, because voting machines are technically computers, and computers, of course, are hackable. And it can be far easier to control a machine than you might expect, as this hacker demonstrates on a model currently used in at least 18 states.
All they have to do, this bad actor, would be to open up this machine by pressing this button right here. When it's off, removing the card reader, removing this, you don't need any tools to do this. Unplugging this, again, you don't need any tools to do this. Turning it on, all you have to do is pick this lock here with a ballpoint pen. Open this up, press the red button, and we're gonna let it boot up here. Just click cancel and OK. And now I have full admin access, under 2 minutes.
Holy shit! That should have been a lot more difficult. You want hacking into a voting machine to be at least as difficult as breaking into Fort Knox, which incidentally is really hard. You need to build a big giant wooden horse.
here comes the joke.
Roll it up to the gate, and then you wait for all the guards to say, that's a fucking A+ horse right there. Let's put that inside our fort where the gold lives.
Trojan horse
And then,
gag and
while
Fort
they're distracted
Knox,
trying to drag the
gold
horse in,
brick.
you sneak in the back door and you steal the gold. It takes a lot of work, but trust me, it makes you value the gold much, much more.
So
Now,
just a gag, right?
Hackers find vulnerabilities in voting machines all the time, and we've not always been great at responding. A Finnish man named...
We should pause right there. That machine, did you see what she did to the machine? See, one of the problems I have with dropping the gag in right after that is that I think everybody just forgot about the girl taking 2 minutes and a ballpoint pen and basically compromising the machine to the extent of being able to get to the admin screen. So you can now change anything you want. Anybody who had any access to any machine could change anything they want if they had 2 minutes of time, say 5 to make the actual changes. And this is going on all over the place. I feel we came close to proving it, and I wanted that to become a national discussion. You know, I'm not like Joe Rogan. I'm not like Alex, whatever. I'm a journalist who has no place left to go to discuss honestly and in depth how to combat the complete absurdity of the false news we're living in now. And the voting is the biggest issue. One of the biggest issues. I've covered it quite profoundly for a long time. And I may do a couple more of these using shows, but John does a great job here now of talking about manipulating machines. And we'll listen to that.
Ari Hursty once found one of the most severe security flaws ever discovered in a voting system. And he alerted the company who made the machine. They created a patch to fix the vulnerability, which is good. Unfortunately, while they put the patch out in 2006, we know the state of Georgia just never installed it, because a recent court case found their machines had not been updated since at least 2005. They'd essentially been hitting the remind me tomorrow button on a critical security update for over a decade, meaning Georgia's election systems operate at the same level of technical proficiency as every dad. His laptop weighs 21 pounds. He has a Yahoo mail address that he can't open because it only receives porn. And he has a Hotmail address he can't open because it only sends porn to his Yahoo address. His life is a beautiful mystery. And look, voting...
So that's a pretty interesting little sequence there. Again, the gag's funny, but it's horrifying because what he's saying is that, you know, these machines are accessible. And he's now going to discuss that. I guess I'll stop interrupting till there's... But the gags keep interrupting it, don't they, in a way? The depth of the point.
Companies and election officials will tell you that hacks like that one take place in very controlled settings, and then it would be difficult to do that in an actual booth without people noticing. But it is not always as difficult to get some alone time with a machine as you might think.
Professor Ed Felton of Princeton performs an exercise every election day. He drives around Princeton to various polling locations, and he follows the prominent signs that say voting here days before the election, and then he takes photographs of unattended voting machines just sitting there.
Jesus.
And that's for him to document that anybody can walk up to these voting machines and anybody can manipulate them and nobody will know.
So to recap, I've now shown you how to hack voting machines in less than 2 minutes and how to find unattended voting machines. It's the kind of important educational work we do here at I really hope Putin doesn't watch this show with John Oliver.
Excellent. Now see, that synthesizes everything. That was excellent. That synthesizes everything between what I did back in 2004 and what's happened now. Right? And the gag that time doesn't distract, but it drives home the point. He just showed Putin, the Russians, anybody, right? How simple it is to hack a machine and how clearly they're not even being under 24/7 camera, CCTV or anything. They're just in places where anybody can walk up to them. And that's been going on for a long time. I wouldn't be this obsessed with it if I hadn't covered it so deeply for so long. And still nothing is done about it. And I'm still watching comedy shows in 2019 discussing it as if it's news, right?
You don't have to actually have hands-on contact with a voting machine to hack it. If it's connected to the internet, you can get into it from anywhere. Although on that front, many election officials insist you have absolutely nothing to worry about.
Our machines are not connected to the internet, and they're not going to be connected to the internet.
No state is on the internet. I find it difficult to hack something that's not on the internet.
Our voting systems are never connected to the internet.
Okay. So first, let's deal with this, because I am aware that man is a lot. His name, and this is true, is Stan Stannart, and he's not, in fact, a Zach Galifianakis character. He's a real human and was actually the clerk for the largest county of Texas until just last year. This was his official photo, and come on! There is nothing I don't like about that picture, besides the fact that it simply hasn't winked at me yet. Oh, Stan! Right back at you, Stan at the Manat. Although I will say this, for a guy so sure that his voting systems are not connected to the internet, watch what happens when a reporter asks a very basic follow-up.
Are the Harris County voting machines connected to the internet?
Never.
So is it ever connected to a modem?
Nope. Well, I say that. It is a secure modem where we dial to an old-fashioned landline to the one of our 4 drop-off sites.
But that's the internet, Stan!
Right.
You literally just described the internet. It's like you said, I've never eaten a banana split. Only for the reporter to ask, then what are you eating right now, Stan? Why, it's just bananas and ice cream topped with fudge. I call it a fruity phantasm. Why? So, some machines that officials insist don't connect to the internet actually do connect to the internet. And even some machines that don't connect directly to the internet are programmed with cards that have themselves been programmed on computers that connect to the internet. So your voting machine isn't connected to the internet the same way your Alexa isn't recording everything you say and sending it directly to Jeff Bezos. It's totally not doing that, except for when it's totally sometimes doing that. The truth is, every voting machine can be tampered with in some way or other. If I may quote an extremely upbeat axe murderer, pretty much everything is hackable. So the solution isn't to make unhackable machines, That's impossible. Instead, we should be making them as secure as we possibly can, while also creating systems so that we know for sure when a problem has occurred, which is an issue, because there is good reason to believe that at least one individual might try and exploit the vulnerabilities in our current system.
Is Russia, as Robert Mueller alleged, attempting to influence the 2020 elections in the United States?
I'm going to tell you a secret. Yes, sure, we're going to do that. Yes. Yeah, this is... Don't tell anybody.
Listen to the laughter in that room. Putin is killing, and not just in the normal his political rivals way. Now, the good news is there is actually a consensus on what we should do here. Specifically, that after each election, we do what's called a risk-limiting audit. That's where we take a small percentage of the paper ballots at random and make sure that they match what the machines recorded. It's pretty simple. Unfortunately, most places don't currently do them, and some actually can't because they use the machines that we mentioned earlier, where you vote directly on the machine and there is no paper trail at all. They are called direct recording electronic voting machines, or DREs, and they are very bad. If something goes wrong with one of them, you would basically never know because you can't audit the results, and things have gone wrong. In one local New Jersey election, a husband and wife were both running for seats on their county's Democratic committee. The DRE machines said that they lost, but they were in the unusual position of actually knowing that that was a mistake.
I knew 33 of the people that voted for us, and we lost 33-10. And I knew that that wasn't the case.
The results had been switched with those of their opponents.
We started calling people that we thought we knew voted for us because it was just in this district of this township, and we know everybody in this district.
It's true. That woman literally went around and got signed affidavits from people saying that they had voted for her, which means one of two things.
Wait, I'm going to let him not make this joke right now because the joke fucks up the whole thing. Now, that is a perfect example. I like what he's doing here. He's now introduced to you what the DRE paperless machines are and why they're a nightmare. He's talked about everything, but it's hard to put it all together. He talked about the slipping screen at the beginning and how that could affect stuff. This is a perfect example of that. If a machine gets older, or if someone manipulates it, the glue can come off and the screen can slide. So now you think you're pressing the glass here, but you're pressing it a quarter inch below. Well, guess what? If there's two candidates, you're pressing the place below for the other candidate. So here's a place where the woman had 33 votes. She had 33 friends who did it, and the opponent had 10, and they got 10. And she knew the 33 people, and she got the 33 people to say, I voted for them. Now, if that's all correct, that's a perfect case, almost a perfect case for the sliding glass problem. Okay? I don't know because he doesn't go that deep into it. These are things we did. We did this 15 years ago at my last job, basically, you could say. We proved this stuff, and it affected a national federal election for president, and everything else. Forget it. There was a much larger reaction to the Bush-Cheney war than people realized. The 2004 election was fixed, and he should not have had a second term, and people were not happy with the Iraq war, and John Kerry was at least helping to guide the policy away from what it had just begun in reaction. And this is how. All right, so he's going to make a joke about her. She got the 33 votes from her friends, and so he says, well, one of two things happened. Either the machine was broken, or
the machine switched the votes, or people will sign anything to avoid a face-to-face confrontation. Oh, hi, Cynthia. Yes, sorry about that election. I was really sad because I totally voted for you. What's that? You want me to affirm that statement under penalty of perjury? Well, that definitely sounds better than having this conversation, so fine. I'll sign anything to get you off my fucking porch, Cynthia. But the fact is, unless you happen to personally know everyone who votes for you on a paperless DRE machine, there is no way to verify the results. It's a pretty good case against them, which makes it, frankly, completely insane that New Jersey not only still uses them, but plans to keep using them for the 2020 election. And it's not just New Jersey. In 2016, 20% of voters voted on paperless DREs, and an estimated 12% will use them in 2020, meaning 16 million Americans spread out across all these states are set to be voting on machines that pretty much everyone agrees are deeply, deeply flawed. And if they malfunction, there could be no way of knowing, which is absolutely terrifying. Because what we have to do here is obvious. It's so obvious, in fact. Even this guy understands it.
One of the things we're learning is it's always good. It's old-fashioned, but it's always good to have a paper backup system of voting. It's called paper, not highly complex computers, paper. And a lot of states are doing that.
Yeah, he's right. That's it. He's just all the way completely right. It is called paper. Paper is not a computer. It's paper. And a lot of states are doing it. Now, I'm sure everything he said around those 16 seconds was some combination of wrong, racist, and horny, but for a brief, glorious moment, he was just absolutely right and probably slightly horny. And look, the good news is, earlier this year, the House approved $600 million for states to buy new machines, with the requirement they not connect to the internet and provide a paper trail for mandatory audits. The bad news is, the Senate has got its own plan providing less than half that amount of money with none of those requirements at all, which is simply ridiculous. We can fix this, and we must fix this, because it is critically important for people to have confidence in our voting machines. And we should have more faith in our system for choosing our leaders than we do in the one that inexplicably keeps Sean fucking Spicer doing the cha-cha on national television.
Yeah, so that was the show there that I watched this morning that had me kind of like, wow. I covered all this material. It's very loud now. I covered all this material, I covered all this material. This was stuff I covered, 15 years ago that we had the solutions to then. We could have had this fixed a long time ago. Everything he's saying we could have done when I reported it. If the Pacifica Network had had the guts or wasn't infiltrated enough, or the egos could have put themselves aside, or they could have read what I was trying to do more clearly and exactingly, then we could have made it a national issue. But that network is not like that. It was created with lots of people in mind, a communal idea, and a singular item like this, they couldn't see what I was trying to do. It frustrates me to this day, because if we would have done it, we might have had this, at least 10 years ago, and we don't have it now. If you looked at his map for the places that are going to get the paperless DRE going in this election today in Texas, they're using paperless DRE today, right here in Texas. And in the US, in Texas. It's incomprehensible to me. And this is the first time I've done election day content in many years. I stopped. I covered the election of Obama 08 a little bit here and there. I wrote a little bit more about how crazy it was in 12. But I stopped covering the elections. And so to watch a show like this right now was painful, really painful. I'm glad he covered those things. You should know these things. And you're being manipulated. The elections are fixed. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that. So I guess I'll shut it down today.